Good morning, folks, and what an ominous silence. So thank you very much for joining me this morning. I'm Beth Lawton, as it says on the slide, and I'm the Chief Digital and Information Officer of the University of Strathclyde. When they asked me to come and do this transformation talk, Digit were very clear they wanted me to reflect on my career and bring some lessons learned. And it was quite frightening to realise that I've actually been in this game for 30 odd years. It feels still very fresh and new, but I've actually been delivering technology-enabled transformation for over 30 years in a variety of public sector organisations. So ranging from housing associations to big lottery fund, now the community fund, various universities in the NHS, and most recently at the University of Strathclyde, where I'm the CDIO. And I started off with small projects, moving on to whole organisational change enabled by technology. And over that time, as you would imagine, I've seen a huge amount of significant change, both in the way that we deliver transformation, but in the way that organisations work as well. So to give us some context to my lessons learned, I'm going to look back first into the past. And can I ask, who here remembers working before the internet? Brilliant. Okay, so we're going to assume, for the sake of our egos, that we all started work around between ages 5 and 8, okay? Just so we don't feel bad. But back then, before digital was a thing, it was all about IT systems, and IT generally led the change. And there wasn't much choice when you came to change. A lot of it was about systems implementation. And I can remember putting in a finance system, there were only 5 products to choose from. And essentially, you went for the one that was cheapest and had the nicest colour scheme. So our processes, because there was such a limited choice, our working processes had to adapt to the systems. We funded them through capital, which meant that we had to sweat the assets. So we'd probably keep them for 5, 10, even 15 years before changing them. And our computer users were specialists. I remember at my first proper computer job, they gave me a white coat to go into the computer room. And our methodology for delivering those changes was very much waterfall because it suited the way the systems came in. And IT were very much the gatekeeper. Thou shalt not pass. We might give you a system and then we'll just sort of lob it over the wall and pull up the drawbridge and you get on with that. We're going to move on to the next system. Now, why is that important? Well, it shaped the way that we budget for technology now. It shaped how we were trained as change providers, changed our methodology and our ways of working, and the legacy and the behaviours from that era are still hanging around organisations, especially the public sector, which is where I started working, and in fact still work. So what's different now? Well, back in 500 BC, Heraclitus said change is the only constant in life is change, and that's true. Change has always been with us. But of course, although change has been a constant background to the way we work, the way we live, the pace of change has accelerated over our working lives. We've tended to move from organisations which worked in a local context to interacting in a global context. We're operating in far more complex systems. A lot of us now within ecosystems of suppliers, providers, customers, right the way across the globe. The tech life cycle has accelerated. You know, my 10 to 15 years replacement cycle for the systems I put in early in my career is now a year if you're lucky before you start upgrading, updated. And our user expectations have changed with the commodification of technology. Our user domestic tech over the last 10 years has started leading the way we develop our corporate tech, because that's what our users expect. Obviously, there's that increased pace of improvement and change, and also our organisations tend to be working at a much reduced resilience, and that impacts on our ability to both deliver change. You know, we're always asked to make us more resilient, deliver efficiencies, deliver effectiveness, but it makes it harder because our resources are stretched much thinner. So what does that mean for digital transformation? Well, first of all, if we look at our digital environment now, the humans are leading the change rather than the IT. People have a lot more agency or choice over how things are done, and you might find things done several different ways in the same organisation, let alone between peer organisations. Choice is maybe not quite limitless, but so broad you could spend all your time trying to sort out what's the best system because there are so many choices on the market. We need, and it absolutely should be, doing user-centred design rather than IT doing the decision-making for people. We need to move to a revenue-funded model because obviously everything's as a service now. We don't sweat the assets. And having things developed as a service means that they're constantly being developed and we don't get agency over those systems that we use. The patches and the upgrades are pushed upon us and often done in the background with us not choosing time and place. Everyone is a computer user now. You know, people bring those expectations from their domestic life into the workplace and we have to match or exceed that. And of course, our methodology is changing. Print is getting harder and harder to justify within an organisation. We need to be working in a far more agile methodology, and the IT department's role has changed. Actually, some of you who are working in the public sector might think actually the IT department haven't changed at all. They're still working in the gatekeeper role. But in an ideal world, the IT department is working as an enabler. And so we're far more engaged with the business. We have that seat at the top table or very close to the top table, and we're involved in the strategic organisational conversations rather than just being told, this is what we have decided, you need to deliver it. So, given that evolution of digital, and you notice I'm calling it digital now rather than IT, how has our transformation approach needed to change to meet those changes in environment and expectations? So for a successful digital transformation, I think you have to consider 4 themes or areas. Rather grandly in here called the 4 facets of digital transformation. And in terms of driving our transformation, we need to be thinking about all 4 of those of having equal importance and also being processed at the same time. So starting from the top, people. Obviously people are at the heart of what we do, especially in my world, public sector, where our consumers are not necessarily our customers and they don't necessarily pay the bills. We have to be considering what our people want. And our customers or our consumers may be very different from us as technicians, even from us as an organisation. And we can't be putting ourselves in their shoes. I work with students now, and a lot of the systems my team are developing are for that 18 to 21 age group. Now, you might have gathered, it's been a while since I was 18, and I haven't a clue what's important to them, what tech they're using. I can't take my prejudices and move those down to, I'm sorry, not my prejudices, my expectations of systems, because it would be wrong. We'd come up with the wrong priorities for our students. And so we have to put people at the heart of our design process and our development process. We have to consider the cultures of the organisation. You know, I talked earlier about the way that old school IT shaped the way IT is delivered in organisations, the way that funding can impact the solutions that we're able to buy. We need to think about our cultures, our behaviours, and bring people's hearts and minds to the equation, because if the digital team say, we need to do this, a lot of people in our organisations are going to go, yeah, right, make me. So we need to get people on side, develop those hearts and minds, build our peer advocate networks, because somebody who's doing your job is far more, and who encourages you to use a new system is far more likely to be successful than if I step out in my suit and say, you know what, I need you to use this. So build your peer advocate network. Work out who are the influencers, and they might not be the people who have power in the organisational chart, but they're the people who everybody listens to. And embed your users, your consumers, not just your customers, in every stage of your project. So not just that, we'll have a workshop to develop requirements, specifications, maybe 2 if we're lucky, and then we'll maybe invite them to the supplier presentations, and then we'll do some training at the end. No, you need your users embedded right the way across your transformation process. And next thing to talk about is process, because I think, as we all know, if you computerise or digitise a bad process, you've just wasted an awful lot of money. So always think about the process. Make sure, first of all, that you are actually fixing the right problem, because often what people say the problem isn't at all, that's just a symptom. And optimise your processes, then digitise them. So ask yourself, should we be doing more of this? Should we be doing less of this? Should we be doing it differently? Or should we be doing it at all? Have those conversations. Think about your data. So what data do you have as an organisation, and what can it tell you about where your problem areas are? You need, and this is one of the lessons I'll share later, is you need to develop your baseline or your benchmarking metrics so you can actually prove that you're doing a good job. I mean, quite apart from anything else, that's the success measures you'll be putting on your CV when you go for your next job and say, I increased revenue by X% or customer satisfaction by Y. So make sure you have those metrics at the beginning, and then you can justify the investment in digital by saying, here is the tangible benefits, the outcomes. And finally, you can use that data to monitor your progress to see if you're on the right track, and in the true spirit of Agile, readjust your path if it looks like if they're not making the progress you expected, or worse, you're going backwards. And then finally, the technology. In a lot of ways, this is the easy part. Because if you do that homework with your people, your process and your data, you understand far more fully what the problem is that you're trying to solve. And that narrows down how you develop the tech. And sometimes tech won't be the answer. It will be a process change, and that's enough, and that's fine. You've got to, though, recognise that no matter how well you do those first 3 stages, tech will never be 100% match for what your organisation says it wants, and that's absolutely fine. Because if you did meet 100% of the requirements, by the time you've implemented it, the requirements will have changed anyway, because we're living in a fast-paced world. So I would say aim for 80%, but start with 60% as your minimum viable product, and just make a commitment to iterate and develop as you go, based on your feedback, because often people think they want something. When they actually get it, they realise, but they needed something else. And so you need to build that into your specification and your work process anyway. So always rely on people's feedback as well. So I think just looking at that, and I think if you take away one thing, that will probably be the thing I would say. Thinking about those 4 lenses as you develop your digital transformation. But I think also, as you can see, in delivering transformation, we're no longer project managers. In terms of driving digital transformation, we have a role as connectors. We need to be connectors of people, connectors of idea, connectors of tech. We heard in the Dell speaker this morning how their innovation in terms of AI was made possible by somebody thinking, actually, we can use a GPU chip instead of a CPU chip. Innovation happens at the edges, and we need to be linking people, connecting up different parts of technology, getting those conversations going at the edges, because that's where the innovation happens. We obviously need to be planners. We need to have an idea of where we're going and how we're going to get there, and what resources, and so on and so forth. That kind of goes without saying. And we need to be able to measure. So can we demonstrate the benefits of what we are delivering? And as I said, if only for the purposes of your CV, but also to get your continued budget moving forward and get the resources you need for your teams. And also, we're acting as influencers, mainly internally, but possibly outside. We can no longer dictate the tech that people use. If they don't like their work tech, they'll bring in their home laptop. They'll use what's on their phone. They'll download an app. We have to be connecting and influencing and using our soft skills so that we can bring people with us in terms of the changes we want to see. So, for all of you transformers, here are what I've learned over, and I can't believe it's 30 years. It's gone so fast because of the continual reinvention. But my 11 lessons for what it's worth. Really important to have that baselining and that benefits measurement. IT and digital is really expensive, and people are always going to question, what's your value to the organisation? How are we delivering this? So make sure you've got the metrics. So when somebody says, well, what value does your team deliver? You can say, actually, we've done this much customer satisfaction, this much return on investment, this much efficiency savings. Even if you can't see it in your department, you should be looking at it, how you've enabled it elsewhere in the organisation. As I said, think about those 4 elements: people, process, systems, data at all times. Look at your transformation in those contexts. If you like, create personas for each of those, whatever works for you, but they're the 4 key elements of successful transformation. The right solution is rarely quick and easy. And how many of us have had somebody come back to us and say, I saw this shiny thing demonstrated at a conference and it's the answer to all my problems and I need you to go out and buy it. I used to have a managing director. Every time he went on holiday, we quivered in fear of him coming back, because he would go to the airport bookshop and he would get whatever management guru's how-to guide at the bookshop, and he would read it on holiday and he would come back and say the answer to our questions is this book, and he would bring in experts from the States and we would work through the methodology and we'd wait for his next holiday and we'd do it all again. So much money wasted, so much time and effort wasted, because he never actually defined the product of what his problem was. So spend time working out what problem you are trying to fix or what issue you're trying to fix. All that time will pay dividends in the future. And if you want a tool that's really helpful for that, look at the Design Council's Double Diamond methodology. I found that's been really helpful in shaping people's thinking. Also, good enough is good enough. Don't aim for excellence, because excellence is a moving target. Just think about good enough to meet our needs for now. Keep iterating, keep evolving. And on that line, you can plan, but know that circumstances will change. You need to be prepared to adapt that plan. Do not stick rigidly to it. And also remember that projects are not complete when they move to business as usual. We have, used to be that people, IT would implement a system, throw it over the wall, there you are, get on with it, you're a user. And people had no choice, so they had to get on with it. What we're looking at now is we need to embed projects. The NHS looks at having a 10-year payback period for any IT project. They recognise that some of the benefits won't be realised for 10 years. So we can train people in how to use a new system, a new product. But once it's out there, we need to keep revisiting, we need to keep refining, get the feedback from them in case we need to develop our systems. But also we need to support people to get the best out of it. I'm sure you've seen the quotes about people only ever use 20% of Excel. Well, if you think about the amount of money we spend on digital transformation, if we do that and people only use 20% of the product, that's not a really good return on investment, is it? So we need to help people to get more out of it, and it may well be that will stop them herring off on ideas of this thing I've seen at a conference will solve all my problems, because what they've already got might do that. And then part 2, build your networks, both internal and external. None of us now can work in isolation. And I say this as somebody who went into tech so I wouldn't have to deal with humans. we have to be out there working with our organisations. We need to take a whole system approach, and that means we have to understand the whole of the organisation and the environment that it works in. So for many of us, that means getting out of our comfort zone. It means inserting ourselves into conversations, into user groups, into coffee conversations. We as individuals have to evolve. And I think, again, always keep learning. That's one of the lessons that I've learned, is we can't rely on one skill set to see us all the way through our careers. We will reinvent our careers. I mean, as I've said, in the 30 years I've been in this game, I think I've reinvented myself 6, 7, 8 times to get to the role I'm at now. Bizarrely, this is the role I told my careers advisor at 14 I wanted to do. And the trouble was, it hadn't been invented then, so she told me if I wanted to work with computers, I could go and be a secretary. So, you know, the internet happened in the course of my career and changed everything. AI is now happening and will change everything. We have an opportunity to reinvent the organisations we work for. We have the opportunity to reinvent ourselves. And I think, again, really important for us to be able to learn, to grow, to pivot. So stay curious on that, keep evolving. And as part of that, time spent on connecting is rarely wasted. You know, chats over coffee can build alliances, can help you connect people, identify those areas of common interest, but also, I talked about innovation happening at the edges, that idea of being able to take a technology that's used in one place and use it somewhere else. Those don't come out of structured conferences or looking at something on the internet. Those come out of chance encounters, doing something left field. If we all look to the same sources for our ideas, we are all going to come up with the same answers. So think about doing something different to your peers, because again, that gives you a different perspective. And those various and distinctive perspectives are really important when you're thinking about how to transform a place. So invest, gone too far, and kept pressing that down, that's not helpful. So invest in your peer advocates, because those are the people who can influence across the organisation. Us going in as specialists and saying, you must do this, as I said, people will go, yeah, right, make me. We need to influence, and sometimes other people do that influencing better than us. So get your group of peer advocates around you and set them loose to advocate on behalf of the changes you want to see in the organisation. And you will have noticed by now there's a theme in some of these slides, and that is that the easy part of digital transformation is the digital. The key bits that are going to make you successful in your roles of transformers are the human. So put humans at the centre of everything you're doing in your transformation path, and it's going to massively increase your chances of success. So thank you very much, and I think we move to questions. So we have a microphone and we're recording this session for future use. So if you do have a question, can you hold on till the microphone gets you, please? Because otherwise I have to repeat all your questions and I might lose some nuances. So gentleman here and then gentleman behind him. It's already question time, isn't it?
Hi, thank you very much. It's very interesting. So David Ebert, I work for Tata Consultancy Services. I used to work at University Imperial College London for almost 10 years. One of the big challenges we had around benefits realisation was actually being able to quantify the benefits, because often the benefits were not always quantitative, but qualitative. And trying to put that across in a business case and then trying to justify that afterwards as to show the return on investment was a challenge. How have you overcome that?
Well, it's still a work in progress, and I think we do always still try and evolve. But certainly from our perspective, what we've been doing at the university is, yes, we have those quantitative measures, but in terms of qualitative, we have a number of surveys that we do. So we measure our digital maturity across the organisation, so in terms of staff, our students, our academics. We look at student surveys. We've got questions there specifically about the IT, the learning experience, so we can gather things there. We always look for stories and case studies. So again, we have those qualitative measures. We're able to say, okay, we have done this and here is the user experience on it. So we're gradually building a resource on our internal website to be able to point people to say that, okay, this group have seen these benefits, you might see those benefits. Yeah, the quantifiables are the easy, you're absolutely right, but the qualitatives are what win your hearts and minds. So it's always worth gathering that, that feedback and putting it in a way that you can publish it and use it. And you know, those case studies, we publish them on the newsletters, we talk about them at events like this, we point people to the website and we get it into people's psyche.
Hi, I'm Gordon Mackenzie from Queen Margaret University in Edinburgh, but I'm not from the IT side. I'm from strategic development, if you like, so I have a broader interest. And you've sort of started answering part of the question I was going to ask, but it's about this idea of customer focus and whether the focus is on the students or whether it's more on the efficient delivery of university processes. And thinking back to the session we had this morning about focusing on customers and ID departments understanding the business, do you think that sort of applies in the same way in the university sector?
I think it absolutely does. I think there's possibly, along with a lot of the public sector, there is that problem with sort of the university pays for the digital services, but the consumers are kind of one step removed from that process. So we have to find a way of making sure that they have a voice in it. But I think it makes it more complex because you have a lot more stakeholders and also stakeholders with competing views. And I think that's the key thing at a university. Saw it in the health service as well. I suspect it's more prevalent in public sector as opposed to private sector because obviously profit motive doesn't come into public sector in the same way and doesn't focus the mind. So you have special interest groups. So academics will say, high performance computing, I need more bandwidth there, I need access to high performance computing. Equally, we'll have students saying, we want more online lecturing, our lecturers want to deliver in-person lecturing, excuse me. So one part of our task is to balance all of those competing requirements, and sometimes they are competing. And the use case stories I was just talking about is one way of doing that because you can make it real to people. The peer advocates, again, it's a way to get people engaged with their peers. In the NHS, of course, a consultant would always say, oh, patient safety, can't possibly do that because it's patient safety. But if I could bring in a consultant who had done it and say, oh no, I've addressed the issues this way, they would listen to them in a way they wouldn't listen to me. So again, it's building our networks as well to try and work out what's important to people and then couch the arguments or the plan within a framework that they understand and they agree with.
Hi there, Melissa Wilson. I work with NatWest. I would absolutely agree that peer advocates are really essential in driving and influencing change. How have you found ways of keeping your peer advocates engaged, especially if it goes on for a long time? A really good question. And I think it's by embedding them within the process as much as you can. I mean, people realise that a lot of these things don't happen overnight. And I think it's also very useful for them to be able to tell the story from beginning to end. So I've had great success by actually embedding specialists, subject matter experts from Out With Digital within project teams. So they're actually there sitting at the desks with the development teams and working with them to deliver it. Because from our perspective, they bring a really fresh, just-in-time perspective of, no, you can't possibly do that because it won't work for X, Y, Z reasons that you would never get in a focus group. But equally, they understand the limitations because they're in the team and they're listening to the team solving problems. So they're able to go back to their peers and say, actually, you can't do it because of these following reasons. So where possible, I would absolutely say if you're running a project, especially a major project, get some subject matter experts and
get them in your teams. They should be sitting at the same desks. A little harder, I know, given that we're all working in hybrid fashion, but rather than, and have them as part of the process all the way through, rather than just pulling them in at different points when you think you need their input, because the valuable input comes from somebody having a conversation because they've overheard a phone call. No, I think, thank you. We have a couple more minutes, I think. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Steph Martin. I work for ANS. I'm a data solution architect. I'm working with a lot of local authorities at the moment, and we're trying to deliver data to the government that the government has asked for this week. And one of the biggest problems we have is the people are all on board. Everybody wants to digitise their process. They recognise the manual process of spreadsheets and post-it notes isn't an ideal way to deliver data. But the data that they have sitting underlying all of this that comes from central systems just isn't up to delivering the information that they have to give out at the end. And it seems to me it's a little bit like a bungee cord, and the stretch between what we're basing things on and what we're trying to deliver is just getting longer and longer and longer. And at some point, I don't know, I think that's going to snap. And everybody's just going to give up and say, we can't do it, because if we can't move the foundations, then we can't deliver the output. Is that something that you also see with local authorities and public sector generally? And how do we get government to support the digitisation of the source instead of just trying to magic up answers at the target?
Really good question, and unfortunately, yes, a very realistic scenario in many places. And I think the other thing that perhaps you didn't mention is the potential for error in all of that, of course, if you're pulling it together through Excel spreadsheets. And one organisation, which shall remain nameless, I discovered that somebody had been producing their performance stats in an Excel spreadsheet for years, not realising that they'd got some formula errors in there. So we'd been over-reporting for years. And I think the only way we can do it is by, first of all, informing government and trying to avoid the scenario where they'll just bring in the likes of Palantir to make it all happen properly, as is happening in the NHS. We need to invest in, or find ways of investing in our data architecture. And it's one thing I'm doing at the university at the moment. We're going back root and branch and just saying, okay, we're starting from scratch. We're redesigning the way that we store data, because we have so many little data silos, and the way information is transferred is by spreadsheets. We can't cope with the lack of common data definition and the human error cost. So I'm afraid the answer is re-architecting, but I know that needs investment, and that's difficult in public sector. So good luck, courage. Right, I think we are being prompted now to finish, so thank you all very much for coming.